Holy Gospel according to Matthew. The Pharisees went off and plotted how they might entrap Jesus in speech. They sent their disciples to him with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are a truthful man, and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. And you are not concerned with anyone's opinion, for you do not regard a person's status. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not?" Knowing their malice, Jesus said, "Why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin that pays the census tax." Then they handed him the Roman coin. He said to them, "Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" They replied, "Caesar's." At that he said to them, "Then repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
You all may be familiar with the old phrase, "caught between a rock and a hard place." That means that you may have only two choices in a given situation, both of which can lead to bad consequences. And it may seem like to us a lose-lose proposition, but there's always a better way to go, even if it's a lesser of two evils, even if it involves pain to get there. Now, you may have experienced a situation like that in your own life. I certainly have, feeling like whatever choice you made, unpleasant or even harmful outcomes would occur. As a matter of fact, there's a best-selling nonfiction book that's actually called Between a Rock and a Hard Place. It was released back in 2004 by an American named Aaron Ralston. And in this book, we find that Aaron was literally caught between a rock and a hard place way back in 2003 in a canyon in the state of Utah while he was hiking alone and suddenly becoming trapped by a boulder on his right arm, and he was there for over 5 days stuck. And in the huge vastness of that canyon, no one was likely to find him, and he would probably die trapped, die of dehydration and exposure in that desert region. The only other option he had in hoping to live was to amputate his right forearm with his dull pocket knife. And he ended up doing that. And as horrible as it may sound, he made it. Even though after he did that, he still had to hike a long way out of the canyon to get to safety. And I'm happy to say that this coming Friday, October 27th, Aaron will turn 41 years old. In recent years, Aaron has made a whole new career as a motivational speaker all around the country, sharing his difficult plight, and he has an artificial right forearm now. And he has inspired countless people with his messages. And what are his messages? Well, be willing to take risks at times. Be willing to look at very hard truths. Face pain at times and work through it. And never give up hope. He often said that he didn't lose an arm as much as he gained a new lease on life. In other words, you got to give up a lot in order to get a lot more. Now, one could say that Jesus, in today's gospel, was between a rock and a hard place at the hands of people called the Pharisees. Now, who are the Pharisees? Well, they were kind of like a political party of lay Jewish men who wielded great power and influence on the Jewish religion back in those biblical times. They saw Jesus' growing popularity as a threat to their own power. So they set up what they thought was a surefire trap to get Jesus into big trouble. In asking him if it's lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar, and Caesar's the title used by the Roman emperor, they believed that they had Jesus between a rock and a hard place. Because if Jesus said no to paying the tax, well, he would get into big trouble with the Roman officials, and Jesus would be seen as a rebel for disobeying the government, and thus he could be put to death for that. If, on the other hand, Jesus said yes to paying the tax, well, then all the Jewish people would be very angry with Jesus, since that would be seen as supporting a foreign ruler who saw himself as a god. And for Jews, that was blasphemy, because with the Jews, there was only one God. Thus, the Pharisees felt that whatever answer Jesus gave, they win, Jesus loses. End of story. Well, fortunately, as Jesus was so good at through all the Gospels, he found a loophole. And he gave the simple truth as the loophole. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God. Well, what does that mean for us today? What this means for us is that we should always recognize that we have dual citizenship, folks. We are citizens of a country. We are citizens of God's kingdom. And because we are both, we have a duty to do what we can to honor both God and country, to the extent that we can. And the good that God has given us can be used for both building up society in this country and for promoting faith in God. We can do both. The question, though, becomes, what if a government of a nation promotes something as right and legal when it goes against the law of love and faith according to God's commandments, as taught by Christ's church? That's a quandary. We've certainly seen many examples of this tension all throughout history, haven't we? Which is why we have so many martyred saints over the centuries. One such story is captured beautifully in a film that we're actually going to be showing here for free at St. Mary's this coming Friday. It's called A Man for All Seasons. It's about St. Thomas More. He is the well-known 16th century English lawyer and counselor to the king who was willing to die rather than compromise his Catholic beliefs, which King Henry VIII wanted him to do. And just stop and think for a moment of all the countless Christians who were killed in horribly violent ways during the first 3 centuries of the church, because they were told to stop worshiping Jesus in order to worship the Roman gods, including the emperor who saw himself as a god, and they wouldn't do that. So they died. We know in our own country's history that slavery was once considered legal and good. But we understand it now as a terrible act which goes against the basic God-given dignity of a human being. And thank God that we've had many people over the years willing to stand up against such an injustice, even being willing to die for that cause, in hopes that all people someday could be free. You know, the Gospels clearly show Jesus standing up for those who had no power or had no voice. The sick, children, public sinners, outcasts, poor people. And the church today continues to show that same compassionate love and care for such people and those considered most vulnerable. And certainly the church has been very strong in voicing its opposition to legalization of killing the most fragile among us, especially the unborn, the elderly, the terminally ill. It is our God-given responsibility to take care of the wonderful creation that God has given to all of us. Constantly doing things that promote peaceful coexistence with everybody, even those we disagree with, and to create healthy environments for everybody to thrive in. So in conclusion, as Jesus obviously makes known the importance of living responsibly as dual citizens of a country and God's kingdom, we should always, first and foremost, live to please God. Because nothing is as important and nothing has greater consequences for our future than that, both individually and collectively. Always aim for the highest goal, which is what? Be faithful to Christ in His church. Because that's going to trickle down and affect everything else we say and do during our limited time in this earthly kingdom, as we're always hopefully preparing for the kingdom to come. And if we do that, we will never have to worry about feeling caught between a rock and a hard place. Like that.